In the infinite tapestry of creation, there are moments that define not only the fate of worlds, but the very essence of existence itself. This was one such moment. The Spectre, the celestial hand of vengeance, found himself summoned by the will of the Presence for a task that no other being could hope to undertake. His mission: confront the true Darkseid, the original being whose shadow loomed over the multiverse like a storm cloud of annihilation. The Spectre emerged from the void between realms, his green cloak billowing as his incorporeal form stretched across dimensions. He stood in the realm of the Presence, a place of infinite light and boundless wisdom, awaiting instruction. The Presence, silent and ineffable, communicated in truths too vast for mortal minds. Darkseid has pushed beyond the boundaries of creation, the Presence intoned. He seeks to unravel free will itself, bending existence to his will. This cannot stand. Go forth, Spectre. Deliver judgment upon the tyrant. The Spectre bowed his head, his glowing eyes burning with purpose. As you command, so it shall be. Meanwhile, in the depths of Apokolips, Darkseid was preparing for something far greater than mere conquest. The fires of his hellish world burned brighter than ever, the air thick with the cries of the enslaved. Yet none of his generals or lieutenants dared approach him. The tyrant sat on his throne, his crimson eyes fixed on the massive construct before him. The construct was unlike anything seen before, a monolithic fusion of technology and divine fragments stolen from the source wall. Darkseid had spent countless eons piecing it together, driven by an unyielding obsession, the anti-life equation. Through this device, he sought to amplify the equation's power, not just to enslave the multiverse, but to challenge the very forces that upheld it. Darkseid, Darkseid said, his voice a rumble that carried across the vast throne room. Darkseid. His ever-loyal sycophant emerged from the shadows. Yes, my lord. The Spectre will come, Darkseid said. The Presence cannot allow my actions to go unanswered. Ensure that Apokolips stands ready, but understand this. His arrival is not an obstacle. It is a necessity. Let him come. Darkseid frowned, though he dared not question his master. As you command, my lord. Darkseid rose from his throne, his immense form casting a shadow that seemed to devour all light. The Spectre is not like the gods or heroes who have defied me before. He is the embodiment of judgment, a force of pure will. But even judgment is subject to the truth of anti-life. I will break him, not with strength, but with inevitability. Beyond the boundaries of Apokolips, the Spectre moved through the multiverse, his presence causing ripples in reality. He glimpsed worlds enslaved by Darkseid's influence, their inhabitants reduced to soulless husks by the anti-life equation. Entire civilizations had fallen under the tyrant's dominion, their wills extinguished in service of his dark purpose. The Spectre's resolve hardened. This was no ordinary foe. Darkseid had not simply overstepped his bounds, he had sought to remake creation in his image. Such hubris demanded swift and absolute judgment. Yet as the Spectre neared Apokolips, he sensed something strange, a pull, faint but undeniable. It was as though Darkseid's actions were not just a challenge to the Presence, but an invitation to the Spectre himself. This was no mere defense of tyranny. Darkseid had crafted his actions with purpose, knowing they would provoke the wrath of the Presence. The Spectre arrived above Apokolips, his massive form illuminating the hellish world below. Flames roared in defiance, casting long shadows across the planet's surface. Legions of parademons filled the skies, their monstrous forms ready to defend their master. But the Spectre paid them no mind. His focus was on the throne room, where Darkseid awaited. Darkseid stood at the entrance to his palace, his arms folded as he looked up at the celestial force. "You came," he said, his voice calm and deliberate. "Good. I was beginning to think the Presence had forgotten about me." "You have overstepped your bounds, Darkseid," the Spectre declared, his voice booming across the planet. "By the will of the Presence, you are condemned." Darkseid chuckled, unperturbed by the declaration. "Condemned by a servant of a silent master. Tell me, Spectre, what is justice when free will is but an illusion? What is your vengeance when pitted against inevitability?" The Spectre's form glowed brighter, his power manifesting as a tidal wave of divine energy. "You seek to sow despair, but your actions have only sealed your fate. Prepare to face judgment." Darkseid smiled faintly, stepping back into the shadows of his palace. "Judgment? No, Spectre. I have prepared for something far greater. Enter if you dare." As the Spectre descended toward the palace, he felt the pull of the anti-life equation growing stronger. This was not merely a confrontation of power, it was a battle for the very fabric of existence. Darkseid's gambit had been set in motion, and the Spectre would soon find himself walking into the heart of a trap unlike any he had ever faced. The stage was set, judgment loomed, and the clash of gods was inevitable.
Are you just watching?
Subscribe, please.
The moment the Spectre crossed the threshold into Darkseid's throne room, an oppressive weight filled the air. Darkseid stood, his arms folded, his crimson eyes unwavering as they fixed on the celestial figure before him. The Spectre's green flame-like aura surged, though not with the brilliance it once had. It flickered as if the very presence of anti-life was attempting to snuff it out. "Welcome, Spectre," Darkseid said, his voice devoid of fear. "I've been expecting you. Your divine vengeance is the final piece of the puzzle. You will be the one to witness the absolute inevitability of my rule." The Spectre's eyes narrowed, his form towering over the dark god. "Your reign of terror ends here, Darkseid. The Presence has commanded your judgment, and no force can stop me." Darkseid's lips curved into a smirk. "Not even your precious free will can save you now. I've long since outgrown the limits of gods and mortals. With the anti-life equation, all are as nothing before me." A wave of dark energy radiated from him as he raised his hand, and suddenly the anti-life equation surged like a black wave. The Spectre, for all his divine power, felt his very essence being tested. The equation sought to erase his will, to claim him as it had countless others. Yet the Spectre stood firm, his form glowing brighter with each passing second. "I am vengeance," the Spectre declared, his voice resonating across the battlefield. "I am the wrath of the Presence. You will not succeed." With a mighty roar, the Spectre released a torrent of divine energy, crashing against Darkseid's anti-life. The two forces collided, the shockwave reverberating across the cosmos. The parademons in the throne room howled in terror as they were sent flying by the sheer force of the explosion. For a moment it seemed the anti-life equation might be overwhelmed, but Darkseid's laughter echoed across the chamber. "Fool, you are nothing without your connection to the Presence." With a motion as casual as swatting a fly, Darkseid unleashed his Omega beams. The Spectre's form twisted and contorted to avoid them, but the beams followed him, tracking his every movement. The Spectre's own energy field pulsed as he dodged, but every strike from Darkseid sent him reeling. He was weakening, not from the power of Darkseid's attack, but from the omnipresent pull of the anti-life equation. The Spectre staggered, the green flame surrounding him flickering and waning. Darkseid's laughter grew louder, more triumphant. "You cannot escape it, Spectre. The anti-life equation devours all. There is no defiance, no escape." The Spectre's form flickered as if he were on the verge of disintegrating, but in his deepest essence, something awakened. The last vestiges of his divine wrath surged. He would not be erased, not while his will still burned. With a final, Furious cry, he gathered his strength and surged forward, his energy pushing past Darkseid's Omega beams. Darkseid's eyes widened. No, this cannot be. You are not meant to resist. With a ferocious blow, the Spectre struck Darkseid, the shockwave of divine wrath shattering the walls of the palace. Darkseid was thrown backward, his immense form crashing into the obsidian. Thrown, but he rose, anger and disbelief written across his face. The Spectre towered above him, glowing with the pure essence of divine judgment. Your reign ends now, Darkseid, the Spectre declared. The presence will not allow your madness to spread any further. For a moment, Darkseid hesitated, a flicker of concern crossing his face. But he was not a god of hesitation. He was the embodiment of inevitability. He raised his hand once more, and the anti-life equation rippled outward like an unstoppable tide, crashing against the Spectre's very core. This time, it was not just the energy that assaulted the Spectre, but a force that reached into the very depths of his being, severing his divine connection to the presence. The green flame of vengeance dimmed to a flicker, and the Spectre's form began to falter, his godlike presence shrinking into something far more fragile. No, the Spectre gasped, feeling the very essence of his immortality eroding, his body shrinking, his power fading. This is impossible. Darkseid's voice was cold and triumphant. It is inevitable, Spectre. The anti-life equation strips you of everything, your immortality, your divine power, even your very essence. The Spectre's once glorious form was reduced to a shadow of itself. His towering, radiant presence was gone, and in its place, a weakened figure stood, no longer the divine embodiment of vengeance, but a mere mortal, trembling under the weight of the anti-life equation. You have done well, Spectre, Darkseid said, his tone mocking. You stopped me, yes, but in doing so you became as nothing, a shadow of your former self. You were never truly immortal, not in the face of the equation. The Spectre collapsed. To his knees, his once mighty presence flickering like a dying ember. His connection to the presence was gone, lost forever. He had succeeded in stopping Darkseid's plans, but at the cost of everything he had been. I failed, the Spectre whispered, the weight of his defeat pressing down on him like a mountain. Darkseid looked down upon him, unfeeling and unmoved. You did not fail. You were always meant to serve the inevitable. Now, you are mine to command, just like all who came before you. With a final dismissive glance, Darkseid turned and walked away, leaving the Spectre, a mere shadow of his former self, on the floor of the throne room. The war was over, and the tyrant's victory was complete. But even in his weakened state, the Spectre's will still burned. The tyrant had won, but his reign had only just begun to feel the stirrings of something greater, the whisper of a resistance that could never be truly snuffed out. Darkseid had won the battle, but the multiverse had yet to feel the full weight of his mistake.